Friends, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to those of you who are joining us online through Zoom. At this time, we are going to begin the funeral services for Leonid Tartakovsky. If you have a cell phone or a pager, we would ask for you to please take a moment to turn it off or place it in the silent mode. And officiating this afternoon's services will be Rabbi Misha Tillman.
Friends, before we begin the service, we shall perform a very ancient ritual, which is called kriya in the Hebrew language. The ritual dates back to the biblical period of our history. Whenever people received sad news of the passing of a loved one, they would tear their clothes and put a dust upon the head as a sign of mourning. And the custom of rending our garment when a close relative departs from this world, we retained in our community to this day. Сейчас мы совершим ритуал, который называется крия. В знак траура в нашей традиции, в нашей общине мы всегда разрываем одежды. Поэтому сейчас я надорву траурные ленточки, выданные ближайшим родственникам покойного. Blessed be Lord our God, ruler of the universe, judge of all. Amen. Friends, I do know that we have a bit of a mixed crowd with different linguistic preferences, and I know that some of you do not understand Russian, so I will speak English a lot. However, also to honor Leo's cultural heritage as well as preferences of Mariana Iosifovna, I will also be speaking Russian a little bit. So those of you who don't understand Russian, I thank you for your patience in advance, and I'm sure you will understand. Also, when I will be discussing Leonid Mironovich's life, Leo's life back in the Soviet Union, and we talked about that, Shurik, prior to the service, those Soviet realities are very well familiar to those of you who speak Russian. But those who don't, and those who did not grow up in the Soviet Union, you're not familiar with those things. So I think it would be very enlightening for you to hear about that in English, so that you would learn more about where Leo comes from, what it was all about. Be it as it may, we shall now begin the service. A long time ago, about 25 years ago, when I was a young man studying at the Rabbinical Academy, I had a teacher, a very fascinating man. He was from Poland originally. He grew up in the Hasidic family, and then he went to yeshiva in Baranovichi, which is now in Belarus. Then the war broke out. He fought in the Partizansky Otrяд, in the guerrilla unit, was captured by the Germans eventually, and ended up in the concentration camp where he lost his eyesight. After the war, he ended up in the US and became the professor of Talmud at my academy. Now, the man was blind, I remind you, yet he knew the entire Talmud by heart. So he really was a genius. If you imagine Talmud, a vast body of literature. So, he was an older person. Eventually, his health began to decline. The doctors told him his days are numbered. And that is when I had this conversation with my professor, because we had a very special relationship. I was the only student in the class who was born in Alterheim, in the old country in Russia. And like many young people, I perceived death rather dramatically. And I asked him, are you afraid of death? And he told me something that I will never forget. He said, Mikhail, that's how he called me, Mikhail, I already died many times. I died fighting the Germans, I died in the concentration camp. To die one more time is no big deal. But remember this, he said, what is death? Death is nothing. So how can I be afraid of nothing? In those words, he expressed the essence of our spirituality. Death is nothing because life is everything. And this is what brought us here today, not death. What brought us here today is Leo's life. That is why we're here today. Когда-то очень давно мой учитель, гениальный человек, профессор Талмуда, слепой, знавший Талмуд наизусть, он был уже пожилым, умирал, я его тогда спросил, боится ли он смерти. И он мне сказал, говорит, ты понимаешь, я воевал в партизанском отряде, я там умирал. Я был в концлагере, я умирал. Ну, еще раз умереть это вообще мелочь, говорит. А главное помни, что такое смерть? Смерть – это ничто. А того, что является ничем, бояться невозможно. И он прав, смерть – это ничто, потому что жизнь – это все. Нас здесь сегодня вместе собрала жизнь, которую прожил наш дорогой Леонид Миронович. Поэтому мы сегодня здесь. А это не причина для скорби, это причина для гордости и радости. Leo's life is the reason for joy and pride, and yes, celebration. So yes, it is painful to be partnered with a man that we all love and respect, but we cannot resist, and we certainly ought to be proud and to celebrate and honor his legacy. How do we build our legacy? Как мы создаем память о себе? Как мы живем нашу жизнь? Какие поступки мы совершаем, от каких поступков мы воздерживаемся? Well, life consists of landmarks, consists of events, of experiences. Everybody knows that. And some of those experiences are pleasant, some of them are painful. King Solomon discussed that 3,000 years ago when he talked about human life. We are finite in time. You all remember this line, there is a time for everything, a time for every experience under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die. And then within that interval of time, allocated to us by the Almighty One, we go through everything, good and bad, profit, loss, everything. And it is our duty to make sure that we go through each experience with honor and dignity. And that is how we live our life. And that is how we create that legacy. Царь Соломон размышлял о смысле человеческой жизни. Мы в жизни переживаем все, хорошее и плохое. Но главное – прожить ее со смыслом, чтобы каждый из этих жизненных опытов был значимым. Так мы создаем свое духовное наследие, память о себе. Слова царя Соломона. לכל זמן ועת לכל חפץ תחת השמיים, עת לרדת ועת למות, עת לדעת ועת לקור נטוע, עת לפרוץ ועת לבנוד, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, עת צפות ועת רקוד, עת להשליך אבנים ועת כנוס אבנים, עת לחבוק ועת לרהוק מחבק, עת לבקש ועת לאבד, עת לשמור ועת להשליך, עת לקרוא ועת לתפור, עת לחשות ועת לדבר. I will translate into Russian. Всему свое время и время для всего под солнцем. Время рождаться и время умирать. Время сажать и время вырывать с корнем посаженное. Время разрушать и время строить, время плакать и время смеяться, время скорбеть и время танцевать, время разбрасывать камни и время собирать камни, время обниматься и время воздержаться от объятий, время искать и время терять, время хранить и время отдавать, время разрывать и время зашивать, время хранить молчание и время говорить. Время говорить. It is a time to speak. It is a time to reflect on Leo's life. It is a time to rejoice over all that was priceless and beautiful, all that is unforgettable in his legacy. As I mentioned earlier, I will now speak primarily in English because we'll start from the very beginning, where he comes from. Where he comes from is a very tough place, I'll be honest. He is a Sovietsky человек, a Soviet man. And yes, I know, politically he was not a big fan of the Soviet political regime, and quite rightly so. But what I mean by that is that his life path reflects that tragic, painful struggle of Sovietsky человек against the system. And the eventual triumph over that system. Eventual ability to overcome that system of oppression and find liberty for himself and his family. That is his life. He comes from actually a very prominent family in a way that his father, Leonid's father, was a very prominent economist in the interwar Soviet Russia. His specialty was kind of a development. Just to give you a background, the Soviet Union was rapidly growing economically during that time because of the very rapid industrialization. And his dad's, Miron's, mission was to develop the production in the factories, again, in the capacity of economists. So Leo was born in the city that used to be called Sverdlovsk. Now it's called Yekaterinburg. It's in the region of Ural Mountains, or Americans call it Ural. Ural is probably a better pronunciation of that. Now, because of his father's mission, they moved around the Soviet Union quite a bit. And during the period of World War II, and the war broke out when Leonid was only 6 years of age. And let me just mention that in Russia, in our old country, in Russia, in the former Soviet Union, we have this expression, "Дети войны," children of the war. So this is the generation that really went through terrible experiences as children, because World War II in the Soviet Union was just a devastating experience, both in the physical sense of that word and in the spiritual, because it left a deep scar in the soul of everyone who lived through that, without any exaggeration. His father was assigned to go to move up north, far north. There is something called Severny Morskoy Put, which is the trade marine route along the Russian shore of the Arctic Ocean. So Leonid ended up in a place called Arkhangelsk, which is, again, north of Russia, where he spent part of the war. And then the tragedy struck. The tragedy struck, I mentioned that oppressive system. And his father became the victim of purges. Thank God he was not executed, but he was sent to the camps. So Leonid was sent to his aunt. The family situation was such that he had to be raised by his aunt, who was living in Lvov. And that's how he ended up in the city, a beautiful city, I heard, beautiful city of Lvov, raised by his aunt. So, again, I told you, he comes from a very tough place. He lived through hell, literally. The war, the purges, bouncing back and forth, grown in the post-war Soviet Union. Thankfully, Lvov wasn't destroyed, like Kiev or Minsk, for example, were. But still, it was a very difficult situation for everyone. Now, he worked very hard. First, he finished a trade school, which was called Gorny Technikum in Russian. So he became an electrician specializing in coal mining. As a result, he was assigned to the Donbas region in eastern part of the Ukrainian Soviet Republic, where he worked for a few years. And again, this is not a walk in the park to be a miner, to work on the mine. Not only is it bad for your health, it's also dangerous, unfortunately, but that's how life is. Then he went back, he finished in Lvov Polytechnic Institute, which is basically Institute of Technology, as we call it. Just like we have MIT, Illinois Institute of Technology, that was Polytech in Lvov. And again, became an electrical engineer. So life was not easy for him, but again, this was the man of the determination, perseverance, strong will, who set the task and fought very hard to accomplish them, and he has. And now I'd like to highlight a pivotal moment in Leonid's life. Он во Львове познакомился с Марьяной Иосифовной. That was something that just brightened up his life, that changed the course of his life for the better. Life didn't become easy. There's no such thing as an easy life. But it certainly has become much, much better. Because together as one, they had a mission. Because together as a family, they will be having children. And it was their mission as parents to make sure that their children live better than them, a better future than them. That was the goal. That was the purpose. That is why they did everything that they did later. But everything in order. So he ended up working in the place called Poleron. That was the name of the factory in Lvov. Он работал на заводе Poleron. And that factory was почтовый ящик, as we call it in Russian, which means that it worked for the basically for the defense military-industrial complex of the Soviet Union. And his particular specialty was laser technology, which was rapidly developing in the 50s and 60s in the Soviet Union. But it also meant that not only was he sworn to certain secrecy, but he was also невыездной. Невыездной means that people who worked those factories were not allowed to leave the USSR, even if they wanted to. And as a result, people who used to work at these factories used to be called and to these places and would apply to go to Israel or just anywhere abroad. They used to be called refuseniks, отказники. One professor that I know applied in 1971. He was granted permission in 1987. For 16 years, he was in the limbo. But they knew it. So when the decision was made to move out of the USSR, I think Mariana, you also wanted to go to Israel. I think, right? That's what... Mariana, в Израиль хотели, да? Вы хотели в Израиль ехать, мне кажется, да? Потом в Америку. Right? And when they made a decision to leave, когда они приняли решение эмигрировать, нужно было принять какие-то шаги. They had to make certain steps to make sure that they have a good chance of getting out. So, to make the long story short, they found some connections. Они нащупали какие-то связи, потому что в Союзе все было на связях, сами понимаете. Такая страна была, кто помнит. And basically, они переделали его трудовую книжку. They revamped his, they got a special book, looked like passport, but it basically had your employment record with the state. So they redid that book to make sure that his employment with this secret, Polyron facility would not show. And it didn't, and they literally slipped through the cracks without any exaggeration. So they came here in 1980. Иммиграция – это очень сложный процесс. Это не просто переехал куда-то. Иммиграция – это новый язык. Люди по-другому даже думают, по-другому говорят. Даже если понимаешь, что они говорят, не совсем понимаешь, почему. Это очень долго, это очень травматичный процесс. И вот теперь Леня и Марианна, вот они должны были с детьми устраиваться в новой стране, искать возможности для того, чтобы подняться, что называется. So that was a new, daunting task that they had, because immigration is a very tough, very difficult experience. They had to work very hard to make sure that they provide for their kids, that they establish themselves and sink some roots in the new country. And they have. They have. He has succeeded. Leonid Mironovich начал работать в одной из технологических компаний, небольшой компании в Нордбурге, которая тоже занималась, тоже, по-моему, военными контрактами, там занимались чуть-чуть. И затем он работал много лет на Sherry Company. Sherry Company, he worked for Sherry Company for many years, which was headquartered, located in Waukegan at the time, but then, which also dealt with lasers, by the way. But also, then they opened a new facility in El Paso, Texas. And they moved to Texas for several years until the facility was closed, and they moved back here. But from 1984 to 1990, I think, they lived in a much more pleasant climate than here in Chicago. Everything could be more pleasant than Chicago when it comes to climate. So he came back here and he worked for several, Sargent and Lundy, he worked, and then he worked for a Japanese company. And again, he was an engineer who was very highly regarded and very highly respected. Леонид Миронович всегда был уважаем везде, где он работал. Во Львове его уважали на заводе, здесь его уважали во всех компаниях, где он трудился. Потому что он был действительно высококвалифицированный, эрудированный, талантливый инженер. И хочу также сказать, что он был не только высококвалифицированный, талантливый инженер, он был еще замечательный человек. Его оценили за человеческие качества. На работе, естественно, друзья оценили. Он был, во-первых, интеллигентом. Я не буду переводить слово на английский, его нельзя перевести. Интеллигент – это не просто начитанный человек. Интеллигент – это человек действительно широко образованный, понимающий, но также и руководящийся определенной системой ценностей. Это понятие такое специфическое для русскоязычной культуры. Вот он был настоящим интеллигентом в нашем смысле слова. Он прекрасно разбирался в политике. Ну, все мужчины-иммигранты разбираются в политике до единого. Все специалисты, профессионалы, понимаете, да. It's everybody. I mean, I said he was a very well-read man, and he was basically he was an expert in politics. But every Russian immigrant man is. We all are, every single one of us. He was not alive for the party, not. He really wasn't. And yet he was so likable. That was kind of an interesting thing about him. Он не был таким, знаете, очень таким экстравертом. Но при этом люди его очень любили. Он был привлекательной личностью. Потому что он излучал добро, это просто человек чувствует на интуитивном уровне. That's how he really was. У него была в жизни одна цель. Это сделать так, чтобы следующее поколение его семьи жили лучше, чем жил он. Для этого он очень хотел эмигрировать. Для этого они приняли это решение. Хотя это было нелегкое решение, потому что, вы понимаете, это был Советский Союз, это был почтовый ящик, еще могли не выпустить. А если бы не выпустили, знаете, что бы было? Его бы уволили и не выпустили. То есть это был очень риск, это был очень высокий риск. They got through. They made it. Now, он очень любил свою семью. Это было самое главное. Я не буду долго об этом говорить, потому что и Шурик, и Эмили поделятся с вами своими мыслями через несколько минут. Но я хочу отметить, что все, что он делал прежде всего ради семьи. Это был действительно яркий, интересный человек, интеллигентный, но для него семья была самым важным. И вот с Марианной Иосифовной они прожили вместе почти 62 года. Это целая жизнь. И, знаете, это в жизни бывает многое, хорошее, плохое, но они вместе все это прошли. Вот это самое главное. Вместе. И Марианна говорит, дай Бог вам доброго здравия и душевных сил. У него есть сестра Лариса, Майами, старшая сестра, дай Бог ей доброго здоровья и многих долгих лет жизни. Ну, это очень, очень важно, потому что Лариса сюда их вызвала. Лариса раньше попала в Соединенные Штаты, она их сюда вызвала. So Larissa is in Miami, and that's his sister. You know, we wish you good health and good energy and many years of life. And she was the one who actually was instrumental in bringing the family over here. Всевышний благословил Леонида Мироновича двумя замечательными детьми. And it is a mission of every father to raise good children. When our children grow up and their career goes well, we're very proud, quite rightly so. But my mission as the father is complete when I say to myself, my son, my daughter grew up to be a good person. That's when I'm done. He raised good children. He was very proud of Irina and Alexander, or Alex, as he is known in English, or Shurik, как его знают по-русски. He raised wonderful kids. And when they're sharing these wonderful experiences with their father with me, I'll share just a couple, if you don't mind. So Ira's experience was that back in Lvov, when they were, when they had in like a tour to the outside of Lvov with their class, there were boys, and he was a chaperone. So they had to stop, and he played soccer with the boys. But his daughter, Ira, was right there. So believe me, when your dad played soccer with those boys, that raised the rating through the roof with the boys in the class. She became popular, right? Shurik вспоминает, как Shurik remembers, Alex remembers that in Lvov they had a park, Kostushko, I think, park, right? Something like that. Right. When dad used to take him, and they were like little mountains, they were little hills, like горки, где он, when he taught him how to ski down the hill. So those are fun memories. You can say there's small details, but the beauty of life consists of these small, beautiful details. Ира замужем за Давидом, и Алекс женат на Дебре. Irina is married to David, and Alex is married to Deborah. They're very both dear to Leo's heart, and his wonderful grandchildren, Michelle, Emily. Michelle's married to Andrew. Emily is married to Jacob, and Sam, Becky, and Leah. Well, they are still young. Yeah, here you are. Yeah, you're not married yet. Yeah, too young. And Leo lived long enough for his great-grandchildren. He has great-grandchild Jonas. He was 3 months old. He's 3 months old. That's how it goes in life. King Solomon said, one generation passeth, another generation cometh. That is the cycle of life. So, about the generations. At this time, we will continue to celebrate Leo's life through thoughts and reminiscences of his loved ones. First up is Alex. Шурик, пожалуйста.
Thank you, Rabbi. Я буду по-английски читать. Вы меня извините, мне по-русски уже не так легко. Thank you, everyone, for coming, first of all. This really means a lot to our family, and we really appreciate it. Just like Rabbi mentioned a second ago, last night we met with the Rabbi, and we were reminiscing about some of the things that I remember my dad by. And, it's such an overwhelming question because so many things come to mind. And I remembered how my dad used to take me skiing to a park. Not very far away, but for someone who's 7 or 8 or 9, a little hill looks pretty big, like a big hill. And this really brought a lot of joy to me over the years. This really became a really joyous activity for me. But it also became one of the main building blocks of how it shaped me and who I am today and who I became today. The park was not very far away, and my dad taught me that if you want to have fun, you got to carry your skis. And if you want to have fun, you got to carry your skis uphill. And that taught me how to be a hard worker. He taught me how to ski down a big hill, which was big for me at that time, and that taught me how to be brave. And he taught me that if you fall, you need to get up and not be discouraged and to try again. And he taught me how to have fun and how to laugh at myself, and that it's okay to laugh at yourself. So he might not be with us anymore, but he's with me and he is with us by passing all this down to me and to my sister, and as we pass these qualities on to our children. Thank you, everyone.
Спасибо, Шурик. Thank you. And at this time, I would like to invite Emily, who will speak, of course, on her own behalf, and I'm sure on behalf of other grandchildren.
I've been very blessed to have Dedushko Lyonya as my grandpa for 30 years. We had a special bond. He taught us so much about life. We will treasure the memories we have of him. He was a beloved husband to my babushka Mariana, father to my mom Irene and Uncle Alex, grandfather to my sister Michelle and cousins Sammy, Becky, and Leah, and brother to Lada. He recently became a great-grandfather to Michelle and Drew's newborn son, Jonas. I know he would have loved to meet Jonas very much. From my earliest memories, Dedushko was energetic and full of life. My sister and I loved the weekends where we would sleep over at Babushka and Dedushka's. Saturday and Sunday morning, we would wake up. Babushka would make us breakfast, usually including Eggo waffles and Havarti cheese. And Dedushka would make us do zyaradka, which roughly translates to a morning exercise. Deda would lead us in a workout routine full of arm circles, squats, and stretches. Then we would go out for the day. In the summer, we would spend the day swimming or playing tennis with Deda. In the winter months, we would spend time at their home looking at photo albums, hearing stories about life in the Soviet Union, playing cards and checkers, and learning how to play chess with Deda. When Michelle was working as a teacher in Chicago, she would visit my grandparents after school and share the lessons that she taught her students. Deda was always excited to hear about her students in the process of learning in the classroom. When Michelle would return to visit, he had found articles about whatever subject they had previously discussed for Michelle to share with her students. Dziadushka loved being an active part of our lives. We loved hearing his stories, and he also loved hearing ours. We loved sharing our own updates with him about our studies, boyfriends, and travels. He wasn't just our grandfather, he was our friend. He was there for every milestone, birthdays, graduations, and my wedding. So grateful he was able to walk down the aisle at my wedding and see me get married to Jacob, whom he loved and treated like his own grandson. He loved all of his children and grandchildren so much. We felt his love every day, and we'll miss his laugh, shoulder squeezes, and holding his hand. For as long as I can remember, Diada loved to sit in the armchair next to the balcony and read the newspaper and watch tennis. He was a lifelong learner and influenced all of his children and grandchildren to have the same thirst for knowledge and curiosity about life. He made sure that we were aware of our privilege of being American citizens. It was my grandfather's dream to emigrate to the United States of America. Although it was extremely difficult getting permission to leave the Soviet Union, my grandfather was determined to come here and to create a better life for his family. The year it took to immigrate from Russia to the U.S. was very challenging, as was establishing a brand new life at 45 years old. My grandpa and his family arrived 50 years ago on February 13th, 1980, a very special day. He took classes with people half of his age to learn English and started a new job as an electrical engineer. He told us the story of when he became a citizen of the United States. His boss and colleagues presented him with an American flag cake and an American flag from the White House in Washington, D.C., that he made sure to fly in every American holiday. His son Alex now has this flag, which will serve as a beautiful memory of Diada's work and sacrifice to bring his family here and his pride in his country. He taught us that America is the best country in the world because it is the land of opportunity, and to take advantage of every opportunity that comes our way. Still, Diada's love for this country was nothing compared to the love he had for his family and his wife and partner in life, my babushka Mariana. We used to look at my grandparents and hope that we would have the same love in our lives. Luckily, my sister and I do, and we try to emulate their relationship with our own husbands. They always treated each other with mutual love and respect. Their love for each other was apparent to all those around them. They had a huge 50th anniversary party at a Russian restaurant, and I remember being in awe of how many people came to join them and celebrate their love for one another and the life they built together. They would have celebrated their 62nd anniversary this September. Babushka was with him until the very end. Babushka just told me a story that I never knew about them. Whenever they would go on road trips, my grandfather would ask Babushka to sing for him. He loved her voice and could listen for hours. On Diada's last day with us, Babushka sang their song to him. To translate from Russian, the song lyrics said, "Whenever we are together, we can't say goodbye to each other. Fields and forests and flowers are green not from the sun, but because of our love for each other. I love you so much that you will never stop loving me. Я люблю тебя так, что ты не сможешь никак, никогда, никогда, никогда разлюбить не могу." Diadushka's rich life is evident when you step inside his home. The walls are covered with his collection of pins, artwork, and photographs from their travels around the world, as well as photographs and artwork of his children and grandchildren. You can sense his pride and joy when you step inside. Diada was intelligent, funny, strong, humble, and kind. Diadushka, thank you for teaching us. Thank you for all the love and support you gave us. You brought so much joy to your friends, your family, and babushka. We will miss you and carry your love with us every day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Спасибо. Let us honor Leo's memory with a moment of silence. Please rise. Прошу встать. Не, пусть сидит, если что. It's okay if she sits. It's okay if she sits. С нами Бог, не там в шатре лазурном, не за пределами бесчисленных миров, не в злом огне и не в дыхании бурном, и не в уснувшей памяти веков. Он здесь теперь, средь суеты случайной, в потоке шумном жизненных тревог. Владеешь ты всерадостную тайной, бессильно зло, мы вечны, с нами Бог. אל מלא רחמים שוכם במרומים, אמצע מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים מותרים כזהר הרקיעים מעשירים, את נשמת ליאוניד בן מירון שהלך לעולמו, בעל הרחמים יסתרגו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, יצור בצור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן. God full of mercy, who dwells in the heights, provide a sure rest upon the divine presence's wings, within the range of the holy, pure, and glorious, who shine and resemble the skies, to the soul of our beloved Leo. The Master of mercy will protect him forever, and will bind his soul in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance, may he rest in peace. Let us all say, Amen. Please be seated. Прошу садиться.
Thank you. Friends, this concludes the services here at the chapel. The interment and burial services will continue at Shalom Memorial Park in Arlington Heights. For those of you traveling with us to the cemetery in the funeral procession, please keep the following safety precautions in mind. Please make sure your bright headlights and your four-way hazard flashers are on at all times. Please be sure to obtain an orange funeral safety sticker for your windshield of your car, and we will be providing several of the cars throughout the procession with a magnetic orange flag to be placed on top of your car. Please travel as close as safety permits to the car in front of you to avoid any gaps in our procession. And for your own safety and security, I would suggest not speaking or texting while driving to the cemetery. As we make our way through the intersections, if the car in front of you goes through it, please proceed with caution, but please follow that car through and feel free to use your horn liberally as we make our way to the cemetery. At this time,
You mentioned the Shiva at my mom's place.
yes. Thank you. And also the family will be together following the interment. So after the burial at the cemetery, people are welcomed back to Mariana's home at 9346 Landings Lane, Unit 406 in Des Plaines. Again, 9346 Landings Lane in Des Plaines. At this time, I would ask everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket and the family from the chapel. And if there are some gentlemen from the family or close friends that would like to come forward and walk behind the casket and serve as pallbearers, we would invite you to come forward at this time.
Just follow behind me.
Thank you, and you may return to your cars.